In the cold coastal waters of the northern Pacific lives one of the Earth's most extraordinary creatures. Using its nimble paws almost like hands, this highly intelligent animal cares for its young in surprisingly tender ways. This is the sea otter. In the hands of an otter, a rock becomes a tool. But this remarkable ability is only a small part of what makes this animal so fascinating. Their ocean home is beautiful, but it can also be harsh and demanding. This is a world full of challenge, and it is here that our sea otter adventure unfolds. Once hunted nearly to extinction for their incomparable fur, small groups or rafts of sea otters are now a common sight, floating in the kelp beds of central California. Their distinctive personalities show through even when resting. Each otter strikes its own unique napping pose. This otter anchors itself in place by wrapping up in a kelp blanket. The buoyant mats also make a convenient perch for a snowy egret, not far from the rocks where harbor seals bask in the sun. A black oyster catcher searches for a snack among the rocks of a wave-washed shore. This is Big Sur, a 100-mile-long stretch of California wilderness. A rugged and inaccessible shoreline, despite a winding scenic highway that cliff walks high above. In the chilly waters below, a sea otter grooms its dense velvety fur. Its pelt is the richest of any mammal, with more hairs in 1 square inch than most dogs have on their entire bodies. They groom not only to keep clean, but also to fluff air into the pelt, for it is the air layer trapped within the fur that keeps their skin dry and their bodies warm. Like a creature dwelling in the treetops of a rainforest, the sea otter floats above a leafy chaos. It is the canopy of an underwater jungle of giant kelp. From a seafloor sometimes 150 feet deep, the ropey stems reach up towards the light, growing faster than any other plant on Earth. This twilight place teems with life. From the small and menacing to the large and amusing, some kelp residents are appealingly familiar, while others resemble creatures from an alien planet. And above this shadowy world floats the sea otter. Adults weigh 70 to 100 pounds, the smallest truly marine mammal on Earth. They have evolved from land animals that resembled large weasels, but otters are now so utterly at home in the sea that they even bear their young here. When possible, otters keep their furless paws dry in order to conserve body heat. Yet most Californian otters never set foot on dry land. Each individual otter seems to have its own favorite menu, but as a group, they eat a wide variety of foods. This otter is taking advantage of one of the most readily obtained snacks, concentrations of marine snails. The snails are small but plentiful, and this otter harvests them like grapes from a vine. Folding up to a dozen snails into the loose skin under its arm, the otter gleans the kelp plant from bottom to top. Otters that exclusively eat snails are often old or sick. Lean ribs reveal that snails alone are just enough to keep this otter alive. Snails are easy to find, but their shells are hard to open. Sea otters have an ingenious solution to this problem. They use rocks as anvils, and they employ stones of every size and shape for the task. Otters eat snails one after another, like people eat peanuts. Sea otters are one of the very few animals that use tools. Some otters use a rock to hammer shellfish attached to the seabed. A scavenging gull hangs around uninvited, hoping to snatch a cast-aside scrap of food. A much more unusual dinner guest is this watchful cormorant. This bird is here to take advantage of the otter's hospitality in a different way. Although capable of going much deeper, sea otters routinely dive 50 to 75 feet and stay down more than a minute. The cormorant follows close behind. But to what end? It is looking for some small tidbit uncovered by the otter's excavations. Of all the creatures in the sea, otters are the only ones able to turn over heavy rocks in search of octopus, crabs, urchins, or other shellfish. And the cormorant hopes to find some small meal of its own turned up in the process. The cormorant can match the otter for depth, but not for the length of its dives. And growing short of breath, it heads for the surface. The cormorant has stolen a snack, as the otter surfaces with one of its favorite foods, a sea urchin. The stiff spines are no match for the otter's dexterous paws and sturdy teeth. Sea urchins are loved not only by otters, they are also prized as a delicacy by people. In parts of California outside the otter's present range, urchins are harvested commercially, primarily for export to Japan, where the roe brings top dollar. Otters have been gone from these waters for more than a century, and divers harvest urchins that have grown abundant in the otter's absence. In recent years, the otter's range has begun to expand back into areas like this, and fishermen worry that there will soon be nothing left of their livelihoods. It is a conflict also felt by divers that harvest another of the otter's favorite foods, abalone.
Clearly, we are hunter-gatherers. We're going out and harvesting wild stocks. but we're doing it very selectively. We swim down, we look at each individual before it's taken, it's measured. So there's a minimal amount of disruption to those animals and to the substrates. So it's actually a very selective fishery. We don't use traps, we don't use nets, we're not dragging equipment across the bottom. It's a pretty clean activity. We often think of ourselves as tending gardens underwater, and it's very much like that.
Sea otters value abalone more than any other food, and they forage for them much like human divers. But otters respect no limits on the number or size of their catch. As a result, within the otter's range there are comparatively few abalone, and those that remain are to be found only in deep crevices and nooks. Not all sea otters have a knack for finding abalone. Many dives to the same spot may be necessary to dislodge the abalone's powerful suction grip. A large abalone is worth the extra effort. An otter burns lots of calories just keeping warm. An adult may need more than 20 pounds of food each day. It is a big appetite, and it has a major impact on the numbers of many shellfish like abalone. Bits of debris drift down toward the kelp. They do not go unnoticed. A scrap of abalone is a sizable meal for this lucky kelp bass. Sea otters are remarkable divers, able to plunge 300 feet deep and stay down nearly 4 minutes without a breath. Wherever otters forage, abalone this large and accessible are an uncommon treasure. A sea otter's belly is also its dinner plate. With gulls for an audience, this one devours a large portion of abalone meat while it deftly balances the empty shell on its stomach. The discarded shell drifts down to rest beside what may become the otter's next meal. A bed of abalone that are about to spawn. From small holes that perforate the shell, this female spews out eggs by the millions, while nearby males simultaneously discharge their semen. These emissions can also be induced in a laboratory. People cultivate abalone as if they were miniature livestock. These tiny marine snails are fattened up on their favorite food, living blades of kelp. It takes several years to reach market size, but the future of this enterprise looks promising. It remains to be seen whether abalone mariculture will ease the conflict between sea otters and fishermen. In the expanse of this wild shore, such controversies seem remote from the otters that while away a sunny afternoon. This female otter has recently come into heat, and a nearby male responds. The female's scent can be detected more than a mile away. This male finds the attraction irresistible. Together they begin a rough and tumble courtship. During this time, the male never lets the female out of his sight, and the pair copulates frequently. He often grips her roughly by the muzzle, which, amazingly, may trigger hormones that help her to conceive. Occasionally, the male's vigorous courtship so exhausts his mate that she dies. But this female will emerge from the affair little the worse for wear, except for a very sore nose. Within a day or two, the pair loses interest in each other. The female finds a protected rock where she can rest undisturbed and nurse her tender wound. It will be many months before this female gives birth, and her mate will take no part in the care of his offspring. He goes to find other females within his territory. A new challenge will soon be upon them: the rough weather and heavy seas of winter along the Big Sur coast. Even in the midst of the most turbulent storms, the resilient otter thrives. The storm's fury gradually subsides. In protected coves, there are signs of new life. A 2-week-old pup gets everything he needs from his mother's milk. But in order to feed herself, she must leave the pup behind, to float like a fluffy cork camouflaged among the blades of kelp. Her foraging dive takes her deep below the impatient pup. As the seconds tick by, the pup begins to worry and to wander. She sees that the pup is no longer where she left him. His frantic distress calls draw her to him. With the pup now securely in tow, she heads for the companionship of a nearby raft of otters. In the next 9 months, as the pup matures, he will be inseparable from his mother. She will be his cradle, his provider, and ultimately his teacher. From her, the pup will learn how to use his instincts to survive in the sea. Bad weather is the sea otter's worst enemy, often separating mother from pup or exhausting new mothers to the point of death. In a matter of hours, wind and wave would bring a quick end to the life of an orphaned otter. A mother's protection can come in many forms, however, and this orphan pup has been adopted by a new mum, Julie Heimer, responsible for sea otter care at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. The pup has been named Jodie, and in the 2 days since aquarium staff found her washed up on a nearby beach, she has grown comfortable in her new surroundings and quite attached to her new mother. Care for this 2-week-old pup must continue around the clock, an exhausting schedule, because each pup will accept maternal care from only 1 or 2 people. There are few complaints, despite the long shifts. The pup owes her life to this nourishment, but her future depends on Julie. Jodie, unlike most orphaned otters, will someday return to the sea, and learning to cope with life in the wild requires a mother's guidance. Preparing Jodie for release 8 months from now will demand many hours of training.
Okay, baby?
But for the time being, the pup can rest secure in the comfort of a mother's embrace. In the kelp beds outside the Monterey Bay Aquarium, wild sea otter mothers have their hands full too. Sea otters have few natural enemies. Even sharks and killer whales usually leave them in peace. But there is one threat to the survival of otters, and it is the work not of nature, but of humanity. Only 50 miles to the south of the otter's present range, there are grim reminders that oil development is a fact of life on the California coast. One large spill could wipe out many, perhaps all, of California's sea otters. The Big Sur coast often seems like a land immune to the ravages of modern technology, but looks can be deceiving. In an effort to be better prepared for a big oil spill, fish and game employees prepare to capture an otter as it lounges in the kelp. Divers use special gear, underwater scooters and basket-shaped capture nets. Sea otters, with their keen sense of smell, are difficult to approach. Instead of scuba gear, these divers must use sophisticated rebreather units that don't emit bubbles, which would rise to the surface and give them away. The diver must have a practiced eye to pick out the otter in the dense camouflage of the kelp canopy. The unsuspecting otter is in for a surprise as the diver prepares to scoop it up from underneath. Out of the water, California sea otters can weigh up to 80 pounds. Their formidable teeth are carefully avoided on deck. Colored plastic flipper tags will allow the otter's movements and habits to be traced throughout its life, which can span 15 to 20 years.
There it goes.
After its release, the otter regains its composure quickly. It will soon seek out the security of an undisturbed otter raft, where it settles down to resume its life in the kelp beds near the Monterey Bay aquarium. Inside the aquarium, Marcy Travid takes a shift with Jodie. Hours of care each day are spent in grooming the orphan pup's fluffy coat. The scene is peaceful, but a grim reality underlies the orphan care program. The aquarium fears that someday a big spill may hit California, and they hope that their experience caring for otters will better prepare them to deal with that catastrophe. In March 1989, in one of the most publicized environmental calamities of the decade, television viewers saw the Exxon Valdez leaking 10 million gallons of crude oil into the coastal waters of southern Alaska. It was a disaster for wildlife. It killed countless waterfowl and other seabirds, and was the first spill to touch Pacific sea otters. As the toxic ooze washed up on many beaches, the end, for some, came with merciful speed. Despite rescue efforts, multitudes of those less fortunate suffered lingering, ugly deaths. Until this event, few people knew that otters even lived in Alaska. Suddenly they became the media's chief icon, and millions were spent trying to save a relative handful. 6,000 otters eventually perished, nearly 4 times the number of otters in all of California. Our voracious appetite for oil has many costs that are often overlooked. The life of this otter is only one of them. Alaska's southeastern shore is vast, and in many fjords, icebergs drift with the tidal current. Here, an otter mother and pup rely on their fur even more than their Californian cousins. A male passes on his way to a nearby iceberg. He joins 2 others. Mother and pup watch as the males play King of the Mountain, Alaskan style. When the water is this cold, even an iceberg is an inviting spot for a mother to rest with her pup. But to prosper here, she must travel. In the more open waters outside the mouth of the fjord, sea otters congregate by the dozens. It may look like they are scratching for fleas, but otters are free of such pests. They groom not for comfort, but for their very survival. Although sea otters are associated more with California, Alaska is the true heartland of their range, and here they can be found in astounding concentrations. Unlike their southern relations, Alaskan otters are quite at home on dry land, and are slightly bigger, sometimes weighing over 100 pounds. After all-day swims in near-freezing water, otters must find temperatures here comfortably tropical. At one time, Sea otters were abundant all the way down the North American coast to below the Mexican border. But the greed of commercial fur hunters who arrived in the late 1700s tragically disrupted the peace that had existed for centuries. During most of the 1800s, fur hunters from the Russian Empire were followed by waves of English and American traders. 100-year slaughter ensued, driven by the astronomical prices that a pelt such as this would bring in the royal courts of China. By 1911, when laws finally halted commercial hunting, there were precious few otters left in Alaska. These, and the few that escaped slaughter in California, were the last survivors of a population that had almost been wiped off the face of the American continent. Since then, sea otters have made a recovery that is one of the most heartening stories in conservation history. There are now more than 160,000 otters in Alaska, perhaps about as many as before the slaughter began 200 years ago. The number in California is barely a tenth of that, about 1,500. In Alaska, rafts of 1,000 animals can be found in a single group. Locally, numbers this large can have a big impact on shellfish populations. One of the staples in the diet of these otters can be seen on the mudflats that lie exposed at low tide: mussels and clams, which grow large and abundant. Finding food like clams requires a new approach. Rather than using tools, otters burrow deep into the mud, nearly disappearing into the large cavity they create. Sea otters roll to wash food debris from their fur, and they must eat voraciously to keep warm. Some people feel that otters eat shellfish that should be for human consumption. They claim that otters are putting people out of work, and in a few places, they're probably right. But the otter is often blamed for circumstances beyond its control. Fishermen often point to the town of Cordova, where 18 clam canneries once did a booming business. Now they stand derelict, their rotting piers like slender grave markers. Suddenly the clams had nearly vanished, and many fishermen blame the otters. But other factors were also at work. These dead trees are evidence of one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This 1964 catastrophe warped long stretches of coastline, in many places drowning seaside trees. The area near Cordova was lifted almost 6 feet, destroying the beds of clams that could not cope with the tidal shift. To some, the sea otter may seem a criminal, but in this case, there is little doubt of their innocence. Many Alaskan otters live in the shadow of enormous glaciers. immense frozen rivers of solid ice. Over a time measured in centuries, this awesome mass is drawn towards the sea. Here, the ice wall, nearly 10 stories tall, yields finally to the irresistible forces of gravity. Seals and otters over 100 yards away respond to the disturbance. The shock waves travel more than a mile to reach this group of lounging harbour seals. As the swell subsides, sea otters take advantage of the recently fallen ice to raft up in the sun. None enjoy the respite more than the otter mothers and their young. Although well equipped to resist the chill of near-freezing water, a pup spends much of the day on its mother's belly, where it is protected from the cold. In the immensity of the Alaskan wilderness, sea otters can rest easy. Their future seems secure. Life in the ice demands resourcefulness, but mother and pup find comfort in the warm bond that unites them, even in the midst of this apparently frigid and forbidding landscape. In California, Jodie, the orphan pup, looks to her human mothers for solace and to help keep her cool. Ice cubes are a snack that keeps the pup busy, while Marcy grooms her coat. It is Marcy's difficult task to duplicate the relationship with the mother. As she explains, being a sea otter mother is a uniquely rewarding occupation.
When you're working with a pup, it's a one-to-one thing. I mean, they're looking at you and you're looking at them, and you're a mom, you have a lot of responsibility. You're the person who's going to make them happy or make them sad. So it's a real touching thing to be working with them. It's not like any other marine mammal that I've worked with, because the other marine mammals are usually independent, and that's the way it should be. With a sea otter pup, you're teaching it, or you're imitating mom, and you have a big responsibility. Their survival is based on how you raise them.
Marcy mimics the sounds and movements of a real otter mother. Normally, a pup this young would probably not have to look for food on its own. But hiding pieces of food within the ball of kelp introduces the pup to the idea of foraging. Making a game of the feeding sessions keeps the pup interested by forcing it to work for its meal. Jodie searches enthusiastically, confident that Marcy will eventually lift the empty shell and reveal the food she has hidden underneath. Thanks to the affectionate care of people like Marcy, Jodie is now ready to move outside for her next step towards returning to the wild. Summer arrives on the Big Sur coast, and moderate weather provides a welcome rest for this sea otter mother. She searches many hours each day in order to satisfy her pup's growing appetite. This pup has just begun to develop the nerve to explore a bit while mother forages. His reliance on his mother goes far beyond food. He seeks out her tender embrace, almost like a child reaching up to be hugged. Once safely aboard, the pup grooms contentedly. He is in good hands. As he matures, the pup will pay rapt attention to his mother, not only when she has food, but also while she is searching for it. Even in the bounty of the kelp bed, there is no free lunch, and mother is a crucial role model for the pup, who will soon begin to learn how to feed himself. Jodie, the orphan pup, has outgrown the indoor nursery, and Julie Heimer prepares her for her first swim outside. The protected tide pool area in front of the Monterey Bay aquarium is the perfect spot to introduce Jodie gently to this new and intimidating world. As Julie explains, great care is taken to make Jodie's first experience in the open water a positive one.
The first time we take a young pup to the tide pool, generally it turns out to be a very short session because the pup is kind of nervous. She doesn't recognize the smells or the visual walkway up above. There's a lot of new things that this little pup is seeing, but she is already scared. And we're carrying her through the aquarium from the sea otter nursery out to the tide pool, down the stairs, and we basically just sit on the rock and put her on our lap.
There are many new sights and sounds, but Jodie remains calm, if perhaps a little apprehensive. She has come to accept Julie as her mother, despite the odd colours and shapes of the equipment Julie must wear in the water. With the innocent trust of an infant, the orphan pup is secure as long as she is with Julie. They float together, getting used to the water and each other. Julie mimics one of the ways that wild otters say hello by blowing into Jodie's mouth. Although still too young and fluffy to dive with Julie to the bottom, the pup will do its best to follow her every move. It will take Julie's helping hand to get this buoyant pup to the bottom. In the wild, an otter pup nearly 5 months old has an appetite that keeps his mother busy. She no longer allows him to nurse, but keeps him well fed on a diet of solid food that she finds on the bottom. His diving skills are improving, and now he sometimes follows her and observes her while she hunts. Like a human mother teaching favorite games to her children, a mother sea otter passes her particular foraging skills on to her young. A pup will grow up catching the same foods his mother prefers. This youngster is developing a taste for crabs. But Julie can't afford the luxury of specializing in one kind of food. Jodie, now nearly half grown, gets daily training sessions that expose her to as many different food items as possible. Unable to hold her breath quite as long as an otter, Julie returns to the surface, where she tries to round out the lesson with a simple exercise in collecting snails. The well-fed pup finds it hard to get too excited about so ordinary a meal. Maintaining the pup's interest can be one of the most difficult, sometimes frustrating aspects of this vital tutoring.
These pups develop day after day. Their skills increase with our training, so they're constantly changing and growing up. We need to keep up with that. We always try to be one step ahead of them with stimulation and development.
Julie's responsibilities include the feeding of 4 captive otters, one of the most popular permanent exhibits at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. These otters were also orphans, but they arrived at the aquarium already several months old. Too mature to accept a human mother, they could never be trained for release. As a result, they must now live in captivity, for they would die within days if released into the open sea. In their spacious tank, these otters seem content to be conservation ambassadors. Their charisma is irresistible. There is something delightful about them that appeals to the child in all of us. The otter's charm is big business in places like the aquarium gift shop. Interest in otter merchandise goes hand in hand with a curiosity about the otter's life and the ocean they inhabit. Properly packaged, otters can be profitable. They are a central part of a multi-million-dollar tourist industry that now thrives along California's central coast.
Do you think David would like this, Catalina?
Oh, that's cute.
I don't know if they really see them.
In Monterey, otters have become stars. They even serve as mascots for a local Japanese sushi restaurant. Here, ceramic boats shaped like otters deliver seafood to patrons. An empty abalone shell becomes a plate. Apparently, sea otter pups are not the only ones that need help when it comes to eating. The preparation may be different, but the fresh seafoods served here are much the same ones that make up the otter's menu. A few sea otters in Monterey have become so accustomed to people that they make their home in the busy harbor. Foraging on shellfish that grow on the docks, the ingenious otter is surprisingly adaptable. At the aquarium, Julie is out for a swim with Jodie, now nearly full grown.
During a swim, one could only hope that you actually get to see your pup pick up a prey item and take it to the surface. I mean, that's what we've been striving for months. And when she actually goes down and picks up a crab or an abalone or a clam, that is letting us know that we have reached time of release.
Jodie has passed with flying colors. Now she is ready. On the day of her release, Julie and her staff watch from the aquarium landing. Jodie is moved in a box to the adjacent beach, and when all is ready, she is coaxed into the light. Jodie hesitates between two worlds. Then, with a final backward glance, she returns to the sea, leaving behind the home where she grew up and the only mother she has ever known. For those on shore, it is not easy to watch her go. What does the future hold for Jodie now that she is on her own? With a little luck, she will adjust quickly to her new life back in the wild. The training she received at the aquarium has paid off, and she hunts for a variety of different foods with confidence. Abalone is only one of the many shellfish that she knows how to find. But soon a great deal more than food may be on her mind. In time, Jodie will be physically ready to start a family of her own. When that time comes, will her human training be adequate to prepare her for motherhood? This male otter finds her attractive. It is the promise of a new chapter in the sea otter story. Jodie may someday pass on to her own pups the care and training she received from a human mother. For Jodie, perhaps the best part of her story is just beginning.